Welcome to your Bible guide. We're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 13 today, and we have moved through this story with the Israelites being freed from the Egyptians and the plagues and Moses and all this kind of stuff. And the final plague was God sent a death angel to wipe out all the firstborn of the Egyptians. And so they finally had had enough. The Pharaoh says, okay, you guys get out of here. God gave them a lot of favor, sent them out. The Egyptians gave them gold and jewelry and all that kind of stuff. And so they're moving out and they're leaving the nation of Egypt, and they're going to be heading towards the promised land. And so we're going to pick up here on chapter 13 now, and it's going to give us some instructions today about kind of some more future stuff, really. We'll get towards the end where it'll talk about God's presence with them. And so God had just given them instructions at the end of chapter 12 on how to have the Passover meal. Okay, and that's kind of up there, chapter 12, verse 43 to the end of how to do that. And this is kind of a continuation on hey, here's when you move forward, here's the things I want you to do. Okay, the first thing that God says in chapter 13, it says, the Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the people of Israel, both of man and of beast, is mine. And so he's really claiming those firstborn, and we'll kind of talk about that in a second, because we'll see this interesting thing where the death angel had kind of in a way sacrificed all the firstborn of Egypt as a judgment. And so now here God is claiming the firstborn of the Israelites, both man and beast. So the animals and the humans, God says, hey, the first one that comes out is mine. Okay, so we'll move on, and we get some more instructions here about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, now this was the Passover happened first, and then there's a week kind of feast celebration stuff that followed that. Okay, verse 3, it says, then Moses said to the people, remember this day which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand the Lord brought you up out of this place, right? So remember, this was God's doing. This, you had nothing to do with this. You were there. You saw the plagues yourself. It wasn't that you fought a great victory. It wasn't that you did this amazing thing. God did this for you. Okay, so by a strong hand the Lord brought you out of this place. There's a number of references throughout Scripture about God's hand being strong, His arms, not too short to do things, unlike my arms are too short, but His aren't. So for by a strong hand the Lord brought you out from this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Okay, so don't put any leaven in the bread when you're celebrating this feast. Today in the month of Abib, you are going out, and when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which He swore to your fathers to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, you shall keep this service in this month. Right? So He's saying, hey, in the future, you're going to be ending up in this country, this promised land that had been promised to you for generations. Right? Remember, they were in Egypt for over 400 years, but all along the idea was, hey, they were going to go to the promised land, right? So this is kind of a long time coming, and he's saying, hey, when you do get to this land, and there's all these different peoples there, you're going to need to keep doing this. Okay, so 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Okay, so it's kind of like this bookend, right? So you had the Passover on the front end, and now you got the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the week, no leavened bread, or unleavened bread, you have to eat that, and then at the end there's another feast. Okay, so you shall tell your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Right? And so when you're doing things, like we celebrate our different holidays, 4th of July. Hey, why are we doing this? Why are we celebrating? Why are we, lighting off firecrackers? Well, it's because of American independence. Okay, so if you're from a different country, you might have a different celebration for that. We have Christmas. We have Easter, we have Valentine's Day, we have St. Patrick, right? So each one of these things has a story, right? And so what He's instructing the Israelites to do is, hey, as you're doing this, you're going to tell your kids, hey, here's what this is about, right? So don't pass that up, don't miss that up. One really important thing about faith is supposed to be passed on from one generation to the next. Now, this is really, really important for us as followers of Jesus, right? Remember, all this story does point to Jesus, right? Like, even though we celebrate Easter, which is Passover, it's the same celebration. We just are looking at that celebration through that Jesus is the fulfillment of that He is the sacrificial lamb. And so, but it's really important to pass this on to next generations. Christianity, our faith is one generation from death. If nothing gets passed on, then it just dies out. And so the reason that there's many followers of Jesus now is because it's been passed on from generation to generation. So this is a really important thing, right? So you'll tell your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it shall be to you as a sign on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. Okay, using that same language, right? With a strong hand he brought you out. Okay, and so it's a sign on your hand, right? Sign in your hand and between your eyes, like you don't necessarily need a mark or something. It's just like, hey, that's just something you come across all the time. You've seen that. And so we just see this idea like the memorial, like, hey, remember this. This is really important. Don't just celebrate things for the sake of celebrating. Really remember. And so, verse 10, you shall therefore keep the statute as appointed time from year to year, when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, right? So remember, this is like future thinking. Remember, this is going to happen, guys. You're going to end up in this land. So you celebrate this feast. You celebrate the Passover. Okay, now also when you get there, when the Lord brings you into the land of Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and shall give it to you. Remember, this is part of the promise. This is part of the covenant, all the way back to Abraham. You shall set apart to the Lord all that first opens the womb. Okay, so he's going back to this idea of the first things that come out of the womb. Okay, all the firstborn of your animals that are males shall be the Lord's. Okay, and he's going to kind of explain a couple things in here. Okay, every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, or if you will not redeem it, you shall break its neck. Okay, so this sounds a little strange to us. Okay, but what he's talking about is there's clean animals and unclean animals. Okay, so clean animals, okay, like your lambs, your stuff like that. The first ones they would actually sacrifice to the Lord, right? So they give it to the Lord. Obviously, they're not going to be sacrificing humans. So in the place of a human, they'll sacrifice an animal, one of the clean animals. But something like a donkey, okay, you're going to redeem, okay, which means that the lamb is going to take its place, okay, or you're just going to break its neck, okay. So every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. Okay, so it's this, we're starting to get this theme of redemption in here, which is layered throughout the Bible. Redemption is often used in slavery as well, that you could redeem a slave, buy them out, purchase them back. And now here we see this redeeming of animals and of firstborns to where something is taking their place. Okay, and when the time okay, every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. And when in time, verse 14, to come to your son, and when in time to come, your son asks you, what does this mean? Okay, so again, hey, you got to explain these things. Okay, you're not just like doing these religious things for the sake of religion. They have meaning, they have purpose, there's reason behind them. Okay, so when that time comes, like, what are we doing with these animals? Okay, what's happening here? Okay, this is what you shall say. You shall say to him, by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. So the same phrase over again. Okay, when God repeats stuff in the Bible, that's stuff we're supposed to pay attention to, right? So it's repeating, okay, this is what God has done. In a way, this is kind of like our testimony, like as Christians, right? We're supposed to be saying, hey, we do this, oh, and it points to this. Okay, I live this way because of what Jesus has done for us. Okay, and it's kind of this testimony of what God has done, right? And a testimony always points to what God has done on our behalf. And we're witnesses to it. Okay, and then it's passed down from generation to generation. Okay, verse 15, for when Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, okay, kind of recapping the story here. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of animals. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all the males that first opened the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. Okay, and so he's kind of making this connection here of the firstborn is that because of what had happened in Egypt and in what the Lord did with the last plague, right? This is kind of this memorial thing that you're going to practice throughout your history as the Israelites when you get to your land, right? So this is this kind of futuristic thing, but it's based on, well, because of what God did in Egypt, therefore I sacrifice to the Lord. Okay, it's kind of like this repayment, not full repayment to God because we can't repay God, but this idea of like, hey, we're remembering this, we're doing this He took their firstborn so we could be free, and so we're going to give him our firstborn back. Okay, so it shall be a mark on your hand or frontlets between your eyes. Okay, using that idea of like, hey, we got to remember this stuff that we're going to see all the time. So it shall be a mark on your hand or frontlets between your eyes. For by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt. Again, that same phrase. Okay, now we're going to look at this last section. Okay, it kind of jumps back into our story. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt, right? So he's like, hey, you could go this path, but there's a good chance you're going to, confront another nation and you're going to get a war right away, and you just came out of slavery and you're probably not going to fight a war, and then you're going to be like, let's just go back to Egypt, okay? So he's trying to avoid that. Verse 18, but God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea, and the people of Israel went up out of the land of Egypt equipped for battle. Okay, so they did go out equipped for battle, right? They had all their stuff ready for battle, but it says that the God's not trying to lead them into battle right away, but they were ready. Okay, verse 19, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from here. Okay, this is going all the way back. The reason they were in Egypt all along is because there was a huge famine. Joseph had been sold into slavery by his brothers, the Israelites, the kind of patriarchs and stuff. They sold Joseph to slavery. He had ended up in Egypt, and through a lot of events, ended up saving kind of the known world because they helped store a bunch of food in advance because they knew this famine was going to come, because God had given the current Pharaoh a dream, and Moses interpreted, and they set it all up. So Joseph's brothers end up going because they were starving too, looking for food, and they end up encountering Joseph again. And so this was, remember, 400 plus years before this event, the Exodus. But they had remembered, like, hey, when we go out, like, this was the thing. Like, they were planning at some point God was going to help them get out. And Joseph had made the promise, like, hey, you got to bring my bones back to bury me there. Okay, verse 20 says, and they moved on from Succoth and encamped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went with them, before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they may travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart before the people. And so we see this really kind of amazing thing where God is leading them. Remember, God is the one who sent the plagues and delivered them. And now he's the one who's actually like, hey, here's where you're going to go. And we get this pillar of cloud during the day that they could see, some kind of thing about the presence of God was with them and guiding them. And we see the pillar of fire by night, which would have been a really amazing, encouraging thing for the Israelites, right? Because they're going, they don't know where they're going. They'd been slaves for the last few hundred years. And now God is like leading them. Remember, God's promise to Moses from the very beginning, when he called Moses, he says, Moses, you're going to do this thing. And he's like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know, find someone else. And one of his promises God made to Moses was like, Moses, in this, I'm going to be with you. And this is really something important for us, because we're like, okay, what do I have to do with the Feast of Unleavened Bread? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, we're Americans. We don't even celebrate that. And we're not sacrificing animals and stuff to God anymore. But we get down to this section, and we just see, like, okay, God's presence is with us, right? There's things that we can learn in the story, even that God's present with us, and we need to pass on the things of God to the next generations. And these are really important things for us to learn and understand. And also even this idea of, what would it look like for us to consecrate things to God? Are there things in our lives that we need to put before Him and say, God, this is yours. This is what I'm going to give to you. Okay. One of the things that we do give as Christians is we give some of our finances. We steward some of our stuff and say, this is going before God. And we recognize and acknowledge by giving stuff to Him, He's the one who can actually do the things, right? Remember, it's not like a trade-off, like, hey, you do this for me, I'll do this for you. We're helpless. Like in this story, like the Israelites did nothing, right? They just walked out when God told them to, and God did all the work. And we need to remember that God is the one doing stuff on behalf of us. God's the one for us as Christians that's saving us. right? Through the forgiveness of sins as we have faith in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. He's the one that's doing the work. And his presence is with us. Now his presence doesn't come in the form of a cloud or a pillar of fire, but it comes in the presence of his Spirit that God says, I'm going to put inside of you when you give your life to me. And so we see this just amazing story working itself out. We get to some of the really amazing points coming up in this next section where we get the crossing of the Red Sea. But don't miss this idea that the only reason they can do this is it's God's strong arm, right? Remember, God's strong arm did this. God's strong arm did this. God's strong arm did this. And his presence is with you. And that's still true for us today.